Digital cameras revolutionized photography in so many ways, but for my money, the biggest change was giving every photographer a darkroom, unlimited film, and zero supervision. And while an actual darkroom offered a degree of flexibility in shaping the look of a photographic print, it doesn't get within a nautical mile of the outcomes possible with even the most basic RAW editor. But typically speaking, before you could use an actual darkroom, you had to go through some fairly extensive training in order to understand the way that the enlarger, the paper, and the chemicals shaped the end result. But with RAW editors, most photographers learned by waggling sliders left and right in the vain hope of accidentally making it look good. It's like learning to perform surgery by poking around until the patient stops making that noise. Learning through experimentation works fine for love making, but it tends to produce some fairly horrific results when applied to landscape photography, and there's no safe word for oversaturation. So, in this video, I'm going to look at 8 of the most common bad habits that photographers pick up as they learn to use their RAW editor. Most of which I learned the hard way, repeatedly. If you're new to the channel, my name is Andy Hutchinson and I'm a landscape photographer with an intense dislike for marketing bullshit and absolutely no sponsors to upset. My videos are made possible in part by the legends on Patreon and Substack. If you like this sort of content, enjoy watching videos by someone who's run out of bridges to burn and would like to support me, the links are in the description. All right, let's get into this. The experimental way in which most photographers learn to use a RAW editor can lead to some interesting results and a sketchy understanding of the purpose behind each slider. But if there's one mistake that can take your photo from natural to nuclear, it's every slider syndrome. The design of these apps with these sliders designed in a vertical arrangement makes it far too tempting to simply work your way down the list from the top to the bottom, applying a little bit of everything as you go. A little dab here, a little dab there. The problem with this is simple. Your photograph is highly unlikely to benefit from the use of every single slider. This is particularly true of the clusters of sliders. For instance, in Lightroom, texture, clarity, and dehaze are all located in the same section labeled Presence. But all of these sliders are contrast tools, and usually you don't need to use all three. The fix for this bad habit is to begin editing with intent. Look at your photograph and decide what it needs. If you think it could benefit from some edge contrast, then zoom into 200% first and double check. If the colors seem a bit off, decide why before you begin playing with the white balance or the color mixer. Think first, slide later. Making localized edits means you're not accidentally fixing parts of the image that were fine to begin with. And for this reason, they are a powerful tool in any RAW editor. But these tools can also upset the natural balance of your photograph and inadvertently make it look like a composite that you built in Photoshop from separate parts. Furthermore, some sliders are more powerful than others, and even a small change to a localized region of the photograph can have detrimental effects. Typically speaking, I have found that the safer masked adjustments are exposure through dodging and burning, subtle sharpness on focal points, noise reduction on smooth areas, and minor shadow/highlight recovery. Meanwhile, in the tread very carefully camp, we have dehaze, especially on skies, white balance shifts, heavy contrast or clarity differences, aggressive saturation on isolated elements, and temperature/tint adjustments. And don't forget the old school masks. A linear gradient with a large feather is usually far safer when adjusting color balance on skies. When I began editing RAW photos a couple of decades ago, the sliders that I called on most often were in the instant appeal category, specifically saturation and contrast. Cranking those sliders to the right made my photos look amazing to my inexperienced eyes. Anyway, it took an embarrassingly long time before I realized just how shitty my edits actually were. To this day, when I trawl back through my ancient photo folders, I discover edits from the before times that make me shudder, and I have to stop what I'm doing and fix them. Of course, in this era of social media, it's become quite normal to turn the saturation slider up to 90% because photographers want to catch the public's attention. In fact, in many ways, it's become quite normalized, and I can fully understand why new photographers would assume that's just how photos are supposed to look. But now that Instagram is a dead platform for photographers and all the sensible ones have moved on to pastures new, you may want to rethink your editing style and instead go for something more natural looking. If you want a margin of error to help you with this, I would suggest nudging global saturation and contrast sliders no more than about 10% off the baseline. And before you do that, fix your white and black points first, because doing so often gives you the contrast you were looking for anyway. I did a whole video on the subject of contrast, which you can find here. As we've established, you should always tread carefully when it comes to localized edits, in case the masks make your photographs look like a Photoshop composite. And one of the most common errors in that regard is a mix and match white balance and tint. By way of example, take a look at this photograph. There is obvious separation of the sky from the ground thanks to the mountain range, and your first instinct might be to create a lovely AI sky mask and perhaps warm it up. But think about it. The sky and the land are part of the same lighting system. They have a natural color relationship. And when you mask the sky and shift its white balance independently, you break that relationship. Your brain knows something's off, even you can't immediately say what. So if you're going to tweak the sky, ask yourself if you also need to lift the white balance on the land to match. A couple of months ago, I made a video describing a universal workflow for raw editing. And in that video, I talk about fixing with one slider and accidentally unfixing with another. But there's another issue that often arises when you're using both global and local edits, and that is double dipping. There are some adjustments that are far better suited to localized regions of a photograph, texture and clarity being excellent examples. Skies, for instance, rarely benefit from boundary-based contrast tweaks. I mean, when did you last see a cloud with sharp edges? So if you've decided that a touch of texture is in order, do not use the global texture slider. Instead, isolate that region with a mask and apply it only locally. If you're shooting something like a woodland scene with no real visible sky region, then a global texture adjustment might well be in order. But resist the urge to double dip with further localized tweaks unless you want to make your photo look crunchy. AI masks are not as useful as companies like Adobe would have you believe. Shocking, I know. When overused, they make your photograph look compartmentalized and unnatural. But there is no doubt that the simplicity of clicking a button labeled sky is a tempting option, particularly if you've been masking the old way for years. The problem is that AI masks are rarely as accurate as they appear when that red overlay appears. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen an AI mask that didn't need tweaking. Adobe's definition of intelligent and mine clearly differ. So firstly, zoom in and look closely. If you're masking a strong boundary region, such as tree branches against the sky, then any masked areas that fall outside the desired boundaries will be super obvious once you apply your adjustments. There are myriad ways of finessing the AI masks made in apps like Lightroom, but one of the most powerful is to add or subtract color or luminosity ranges to an AI-generated mask. If it's masked the aforementioned tree, for instance, then simply click on the subtract button Select luminosity or color range, and then click on the sky to clean it all up. And particularly in the case of AI subject masks, always check for halos, which will likely give your masked region a radioactive green or magenta glow. About 16 years ago, just after I had upgraded from a point and shoot to a DSLR, I turned to YouTube for inspiration on my raw edits. And there was a particular photography channel with a huge following and a very outgoing host who started pretty much every single demonstration edit with the phrase, drop the highlights and raise the shadows. It took me a little while to realize that actually dropping highlights and lifting shadows like some Twitch reflex on every single photo you edit is really fucking stupid advice. But it was delivered with such confidence. And yet, this advice to use those two recovery sliders to their fullest extent seems to have seeped into the public consciousness, and it's often the first thing that many photographers do, perhaps because they're also the first sliders in the whole adjustment stack on pretty much every RAW editor. There are, of course, many valid reasons to drop the highlights and raise the shadows, but as with every other tool in a RAW editor, they need to be used with intent. If you drop the highlights and raise the shadows on every photo, then you're likely to rob it of its natural contrast and just make it look flat. Even if there are blown out regions in the highlights and completely black regions in the shadows, you still do not always need to mess with highlights and shadow sliders. The RAW file format is an incredibly powerful tool that has revolutionized digital photography and taken us from the baked-in look of an in-camera JPEG to the endlessly configurable digital negative we know and love. Such is the power of a RAW file, that it's entirely possible to take an image that would otherwise be destined straight for the reject pile and to save it. But the simple fact is that not all RAW files can be saved, and sometimes, even if you can get most of the way there, you should probably let it go. There are, of course, many ways that photographers attempt to save bad photographs. The old black and white conversion is popular. The fine art horizon removal trick is a classic. And let's not forget the famous after the fact high key edit, also known as, I don't know how to fix this, so I'll pretend it's art. Of all the attempts I regularly see photographers deploy to save their photographs, the most common is the failed highlight recovery. While the highlight slider can pull back detail at the extreme right-hand side of the histogram, it cannot work magic, and if there's no sensor data there, then it can't magic it into existence. If you try highlight recovery on a photo where sizable parts of the upper dynamic range are completely missing, you won't get detail back. You'll get flat, muddy grey patches with hard edges and weird colour fringing. Blown white at least reads as bright light. Muddy grey reads as broken. Learn when to turn off the life support. You did everything you could. They're in a better place now. The recycle bin. And that will do us for this look at common editing mistakes that people make with their RAW photos. How many of my 8 examples have you been guilty of in the past? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't be shy. I can definitely tick all 8. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you got value from it, then consider subscribing to my channel for more photo, video, and drone-related content from me. Thank you, as always, to the legends on Patreon and Substack. Your support means I get to keep making these without selling my soul. Till the next time, guys. Ta-ta.